Wendy suddenly realized. Don't look at Claire's family now, the relationship with the Lady Wilson is stinky, but if his family moves out, they are likely to take advantage of it. Thinking of this, Wendy burst into tears aggrieved, and said, but it's not a way to keep going like this, I can't stand her anymore. Noah Wilson had no choice but to comfort her. Don't think about it so much. After all, there are guests at home. We can't let the guests read the jokes. When the guests leave, Dad will give you a little money, and you will travel and relax. Wendy nodded slightly, then agreed, saying, okay. When returning to the villa with her father, Mrs. Wilson had just sent Fredman Wilson into the guest room herself and walked downstairs alone. Seeing Wendy's return, she hurried forward and said apologetically, Wendy, it was a bad grandma just now. Grandma made an impulse and apologized to you. I hope you can forgive your grandma. The old Mrs. Wilson also hoped that Wendy could get Fredman Wilson, so when Wendy came back, the first thing she did was to take the initiative to apologize. Wendy didn't expect that Grandma would take the initiative to apologize. This is extremely rare for a tough grandma for a lifetime, so she felt a lot more comfortable. Old Mrs. Wilson took Wendy's hand, went to sit down on the sofa, and said earnestly, Wendy, our family is facing very big difficulties now. Do you know this? Wendy nodded. Grandma, I know. You are now being divorced by the White family, and it has become a joke for Orus Hill. Although Grandma doesn't want to mention this, this is the truth. You should know it in your heart? When it came to this, Wendy couldn't help crying again. The whole Orus Hill knew that she was a woman who was divorced by the White family. So if she wanted to marry a wealthy family in her life, it would basically be impossible. At least, it's impossible in Orus Hill. Therefore, her own future immediately became extremely slim. Old Mrs. Wilson helped her wipe away the tears and said seriously, Wendy, you used to be a little princess in our house. I spoiled you, your parents spoiled you, and your brother spoiled you, so you didn't study well before, and you didn't want to go to work after you graduated. This is all right, but now our family is not what it used to be. You must change. You must mature as soon as possible and share part of the responsibility for this family, which can only get worse and worse. Wendy nodded repeatedly, and said guiltily, Grandma, I'm sorry, I was too playful before, and I didn't learn anything. I can't help the family share the worries. Old Mrs. Wilson squeezed her hand and said seriously, Wendy, the past is over. You are the second granddaughter of Grandma's baby. How could Grandma blame you and treat you badly? Then, the Lady Wilson said earnestly, Now, there is an excellent opportunity to achieve multiple benefits in one fell swoop. Not only will it solve the family crisis, it will also allow you to find a chance to get up again, and even make her become what you want. Do you want to catch it? When Wendy heard this, she nodded and said excitedly, Grandma, I will think. When Noah Wilson and Harold heard this, they hurriedly surrounded them. Among them, Noah Wilson couldn't hide his excitement and asked, Mom, what is a good way? The old Mrs. Wilson said seriously, It's Fredman Wilson who lives in the guest room upstairs. He? Noah Wilson asked hurriedly, He promised to help us? No. The old Mrs. Wilson shook her head and said, He told us that he was not relatives or reasons, and he came only for his father's last wish, and he has no obligation to help us. Noah Wilson didn't quite understand, and asked, Then what do you mean? Old Mrs. Wilson said, I mean, let Wendy seize this opportunity of Fredman Wilson. I can see that he is interested in Wendy. Noah Wilson was shocked and blurted out, Mom, are you asking Wendy to accompany Fredman Wilson? He is older than her. So what? Mrs. Wilson asked back, Is there anything wrong with being older? Gerald is not very young. After Wendy has been with him for so long, she had an abortion for him. What happened? He only hurt Wendy. What did he give to Wendy? Noah Wilson said anxiously, That's normal male and female love, but Fredman Wilson is already an old master. Mrs. Wilson said solemnly, "What's wrong with the old master?" "Old master, rich and powerful, with connections and resources. Don't you need anything if you follow him?" Noah Wilson waved his hands vigorously. "No way, no way. I think Wendy and Gerald are still acceptable, but if we let her and Fredman Wilson, how can I be a father accept it?" "Can't accept it?" The old Mrs. Wilson snorted and asked in return, "Then you can accept being poor? If the Wilson Group goes bankrupt, what inheritance can you inherit from me? This old villa? Don't forget, Wilson, the group still owes the bank's loan. When the time comes for bankruptcy, the court will take back the villa. I don't care, and I will not survive the next few years. What about you? What will you do then?" "Just like Jacob, go to live in the villa." "Is it a broken tube building?" Noah Wilson was speechless. He doesn't want to betray his daughter, but he doesn't want to be poor either. Just when he didn't know what to do, Wendy, who had not spoken, suddenly said, "Grandma, if he can help the Wilson Group, then I am willing to accompany him. But I have one condition." Old Mrs. Wilson asked excitedly, "What conditions?" Wendy gritted her teeth and said, "I want to be the director of the Wilson Group." This is the position before Claire had.